It never starts with a fight. It starts with a feeling, a quiet fear that something is changing. A distance so small you almost ignore it, until one day, you wake up next to someone who no longer looks at you the same way. Long marriages don't collapse in chaos. They collapse in silence, while both people pretend nothing is wrong. Today, you'll finally understand the invisible fear that destroys even the strongest relationships, without a single argument. It never starts with a fight. It starts with a feeling, a quiet, subtle fear that something in the relationship is shifting. You don't talk about it. You don't want to make it real. So you let it slide, day after day, until the distance grows roots. Silent fear is one of the most destructive forces inside a long marriage. Unlike betrayal, unlike shouting, unlike breaking trust, silent fear works slowly. It works invisibly. It works while everything looks fine on the outside. And the most dangerous part? Both people feel it, but neither one admits it. 1. When routine becomes a shield, not a home. After 10, 20, or 30 years together, routine becomes the language of the relationship. You wake up, work, talk about bills, kids, dinner, and life keeps moving. But routine can become something darker. A shield that protects you from confronting what's missing. You stop asking how your partner feels. You stop sharing your fears, your doubts, your needs. Not because you don't care, but because you're scared they won't understand. This silence becomes the first crack. 2. The fear of hearing the truth. In long marriages, many people stay quiet for one reason. They're afraid the truth could break everything. So instead of asking tough questions, are you still happy? Do you feel close to me? Are we growing apart? They pretend everything is normal. But silence doesn't protect a marriage. Silence suffocates it. What once was love becomes distance. What once was vulnerability becomes avoidance. And that avoidance grows into fear. 3. When connection slowly shifts into coexistence. One of the signs of silent fear is subtle. You start living next to each other instead of with each other. Small habits change. The conversations get shorter. The eye contact becomes quicker. The hugs become routine, not connection. The nights feel longer, even when the bed is the same. Nothing dramatic happens. No explosion. No betrayal. No crisis. Just a slow, quiet erosion. And this slow erosion is more dangerous than any fight. Because at least fights show passion. Silence shows withdrawal. 4. The hidden pivot point, when one person stops reaching out. In almost every long marriage that collapses, there is a moment, rarely noticed, where one partner stops reaching. Not physically, but emotionally. They stop trying to fix things. They stop initiating conversations. They stop fighting for connection. And the other person doesn't realize this moment has happened, until years later. This is the poisonous effect of silent fear. It turns the relationship into a waiting game where both partners wait for the other to fix what neither wants to name. 5. Love doesn't end, but it changes shape. Contrary to what people believe, most long marriages don't end because love disappears. Love stays. But fear takes control. Fear of rejection. Fear of conflict. Fear of being vulnerable again. Fear of admitting that the relationship needs repair. And so the marriage becomes two people who still care, but don't know how to return to each other. This is the tragedy of long-term relationships. They end emotionally long before they end legally. 6. The silent apologies that never happen. Long marriages are destroyed not by big actions, but by small apologies that never come. I'm sorry I ignored you. I'm sorry I didn't listen. I'm sorry I chose routine over connection. I'm sorry I stopped showing affection. I'm sorry I made you feel alone. These apologies remain unspoken. And unspoken pain becomes resentment. Resentment becomes distance. Distance becomes emotional withdrawal. And emotional withdrawal becomes the quiet collapse of the marriage. 7. The moment couples finally notice the damage. It's usually one moment. A holiday. An argument. A quiet dinner. A look across the room. And suddenly, the realization hits. We're strangers, sharing a life we no longer feel part of. By the time most couples recognize this, the fear has already reshaped the relationship. The silence has already done its damage. And the love, though still present, has become buried under years of unspoken emotion. 8. The hidden lesson and the hope. But here's the truth most people never learn. Silent fear destroys marriages only when it stays silent. When couples speak about their fears. When they address the small distances early. When they choose vulnerability instead of avoidance. Connection returns. Not instantly. Not magically. But gradually. Love in long-term relationships isn't lost. It's abandoned through silence and reclaimed through honesty. Final message. If you're listening to this today, maybe you've felt this distance. Maybe you've seen the silence growing. Maybe you're afraid to say what's really happening. Just remember. Silence doesn't protect love. Speaking does. Understanding does. Reaching out does. And in 2025, with the world louder, faster, and more disconnected than ever, the couples who survive are the ones who decide to talk about the fears they once hid.